Hi, this is Eva for Once Upon a Timeline, and today we're going to discuss humans who walk with their legs bent backwards and walk on all fours, known as human quadrupeds. Now, you may have thought that this was only something that you'd see in a scary movie or in a sci-fi movie, but turns out this is real, and it is a Mandela Effect for me. Okay, before I present this video, I want to give you a little backstory. There is actually a song playing in the background here, and this man is actually dancing. It looks a bit like he's having a seizure, and you can see that his limb structure is not normal, but he's actually fine and happy in this video. Now, I saw this video on Reddit, on one of the front page of one of the very popular subreddits. So it's getting around, but even people in the subreddit were really shocked because they've never seen anything like this before. Okay, so here we go. Let's play it. So the guy's basically rocking out at maybe a party or something. But you can see that his legs bend opposite. They're very thin. One thing that really impressed me about this video is that he's able to walk and do quite well with these little limbs, very, very thin limbs, and even goof around on them. It's actually quite impressive to me that he was able to bop around that much. I mean, in my old timeline, I think that you would just not be able to move if that was how your limbs were. So I didn't know anything about this particular syndrome, but a lot of these comments indicate this is genu recurvatum or recurvatum, and it is a congenital defect in which your knees bend backwards, hyperextension of the back knee. Okay, and it is associated with various ligament weaknesses and muscle weaknesses, as well as cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, and muscular dystrophy. I've never heard of any of those three causing anything like this, but it's particularly interesting. Okay, so this problem can range from fairly mild and almost normal looking. Here's an example. Now, if you look at this knee structure, this is interesting because I think this is one of the reasons why I didn't have this in my old timeline is my old timeline had a large kneecap right in the front of the knee here that would prevent that kind of bending. But now with a smaller kneecap that's just a little piece of bone way up higher, then the kneecap is no longer prevented from bending the reverse way. I'm suspecting that the tendons here and stuff are stronger as well because I just can't see that having happened before and the knee holding together, not to mention being able to jump around like that. So here is another example of here's an x-ray. You can see where the kneecap is so high here. So that I covered that in a previous video about the changes in the knee. Okay, so here's somebody with a medium case of genu recurvatum walking. And you can see the knee bends quite a bit. It very much reminds me of something out of a scary movie. I've only ever seen this in the scary movie, and the reason it was scary was because it was assumed that humans simply could not do that. So if you did that, you weren't human. You must be some kind of creature or spook. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of loud drivers outside. Okay, so here's another child with a more severe case walking here. And here's another example of a young lady who has a very severe case, showing a child with it. Another child. Here's a historical case of somebody that I guess was fairly famous in the past. You can see a lot of these people can walk on two legs fairly well. They're actually pretty stable on the two legs. So you can see here that she is able to walk fairly well, it looks like. She doesn't look like she's in any pain or anything. Here's a video of somebody walking in that condition. I'm not sure where this is. Supposedly it's somewhere in Europe. Okay, so here is a child with it, and this child obviously gets around quite well considering he's very talented. And here he's showing off his acrobatic moves. Very interesting. Okay, so one other condition that was interesting, I've just seen a lot of people showing up on Reddit and other social media walking on all fours in general. These people don't have the genu recurvata, but they have something called Unner-Tan syndrome, and it causes cognitive deficits and balance deficits, and so they all walk on four legs. And one thing that kind of struck me is it just doesn't seem that hard when they do it. It seems much more natural than I recall it being. I mean, I as a child, I would sometimes pretend I was a cat. You know, we would always make believe this and that as kids, and I, it was tiring trying to walk like this, and it was difficult. And these people seem to get around fairly well. Another thing that has been kind of striking the social media is this kind of a fetish of people walking as if they were dogs. I looked at this, it looks extremely tiring to me, but I decided to try it. And one thing I really noticed was that it's just not that hard anymore. I mean, a little hard on the wrists, but for the legs, it just wasn't hard. It wasn't that tiring at all. And I think that the new structure here on the hips is probably has a lot to do with that. This image kind of reminded me of the structure I remember the hips before, because this hips kind of make it look like there's a kind of a deep cup here. So if you got rid of this new coccyx thing here and just managed the hip being a large cup, and then it would come down more wide over here, and then these attachment points for the legs were up inside there. And I have to admit that this current structure looks of a heck of a lot more efficient. The old way looked really bulky and heavy. I didn't have these circles under here, and it was one big hip structure, whereas now it's as others have pointed out, it's two separate hip pieces joined by this little tiny bit here. And interestingly enough, when I was watching Terminator, the female robot had, at that time when I originally watched it, had a ball joint very much like this right here. It was like, and I remember thinking, oh, that's such an efficient looking design, but of course only robots could have that design. So I looked back now at the female robot where she had all her flesh removed and she was just her endoskeleton. And now it looks nothing like this, ironically. The whole robot and her head and everything and her whole structure look very different. So it's almost like humans have come to look more like how her structure was, and now her structure is completely different. So anyway, I think that this new walking on the four legs and also this reverse bending of the knees is made possible by this new structure that we have. But I also think it's very, I don't know what, interesting, creepy that I personally first saw this concept of reverse knees in myth, in stories, in horror stories, that kind of thing. And now, in this timeline now, it's a real thing. So again, it seems to follow a certain kind of pattern where you see things that are assumed to be untrue at the time you see them, later becoming true. So anyway, this is Eva signing off for Once Upon a Timeline.